1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Out there in Mandolin land, Mike Heading here, coming today with the old kid song, Mary Had a Little Lamb. What we're going to do with this lesson is try and answer a couple questions I get a lot, which is, the first question is, where do melodies come from, right? Maybe I know what key the song is in, and I know maybe a scale or something, but that's not going to give me enough information to narrow down quickly in a jam session. Where do I find the melody to a song I've never heard before, which happens a lot if you've been jamming with people. Someone's going to throw a song you've never heard and they want you to take a solo on it. So we need to be able to narrow down where to find that melody. We're going to get into that concept in this lesson. The other thing we're going to talk about in this lesson is how to take a basic melody and move it around to different keys, right? Maybe you learned it in one key and now you go to a jam session and everyone wants to play it in a different key. So we need some tools to be able to take that melody and move it to a new key. Mandolin, that's easier to do than on some instruments, but it still requires a little bit of practice. So that's what we're going to break down for this lesson. So we're going to learn this melody in 3 different keys and do a basic melody and then like a basic kind of bluegrass style solo on it. So the point of this lesson is probably not that you're going to call Mary Had a Little Lamb at a jam session, but we're going to use this as a vehicle to understand that concept of where do melodies come from and how to move it between keys. That's what we're going to try and break down in this lesson. All right, let's jump into Mary Had a Little Lamb. Here we go. All right, let's start breaking down this basic melody to Mary Had a Little Lamb in the key of G. So it's just 8 measures long. So let's play the basic melody first just so you can hear it for review. And then we'll break down some of the underlying concepts for this lesson. Here we go. Do that again real slow. Okay, so let's break down some really quick concepts here. So the first one we need to understand is the concept of chord tones versus passing tones, because this is something that confuses a lot of beginner players or even intermediate players when they go to start to look for a melody, right? If we know the melody, the song is in the key of G, we're going to look probably for the melody in the G major scale. That might be one of the first spots a beginner would look, right? But it's still a 7-note scale, so we can actually narrow it down a lot closer than that to where the melody might be. So if we use the concept of chord tones, so chord tones are notes that make up that chord that we're playing, and then passing notes are the other notes in the scale, right? So if we're in the key of G and we strum our chord, our G chord, we have 3 notes that make up that chord, G, B, and D. Okay, 3 notes. If you look at our scale, those notes are also included in that scale. We have a chord tone here, G, then we have a passing tone, then a chord tone, passing tone, chord tone, passing tone, one more passing tone, and then chord tone. If we take it up the next octave, chord tone, right, same note, passing tone, chord tone, passing tone, chord tone, passing, passing, chord tone, right? So again, the melody is going to consist mainly of actually chord tones and then connected with passing tones, right? So that's, again, a spot to look for the melody. If you're in the key of G, I would start with one of those three notes. It doesn't matter what octave you do it in, right? So you might hear something like this to start a little melody. You know, again, I'm just playing around. So I'm doing a mixture of chord tones and then passing tones in between, right? But listen, if I start and focus more on the passing tones, right? If you just looked anywhere in the scale, it's not going to necessarily connect to that chord that we're playing. So listen to it if I do it this way, kind of just randomly in the scale, right? So if I go... So it's similar notes, but I didn't focus on the chord tones, so it doesn't sound like it fits with that chord quite as well. Again, I'll give you another example. I'm just fooling around, making up a little melody, and the chords aren't even changing there, right? But you can see if I highlight and focus on those chord tones, and then use a mixture of passing notes, that you're going to connect to the chord that you're playing on a lot better. So that's always the first spot to look for the melody, is start with a chord tone and end with a chord tone. And then you're going to connect it with passing tones, okay? Okay, so keep that concept in the back of your mind. And then the other concept that we'll introduce in a minute, but just keep this in your mind, is that we're going to give each of those notes a number. So this isn't going to relate to the frets. It's actually going to be to the degrees of the scale. So if we take that scale, so I said it was a 7-note scale, right? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then back to 1. Okay? And the reason that's important to give those a number, even if you go up another octave, right? It's still the same. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. So the reason that'll be important later that I'll show you is that if we give them all a number, each of those notes a number, then we actually can transpose it to a new key very easily. If you can remember back to math class, right? For me, it was way back, but if you remember back to math class, if you want to add or subtract fractions or multiply fractions, right, you needed to find that common denominator. So that's the first thing you want to do when you're adding fractions, right? Find the common denominator. So that's what we're doing when we're giving each of those a number. You might have heard like of a 1, 4, 5 progression in the key of G. That's that same concept. You're giving each of those chords a number. 1, 2, 3, 4 is C, 5 is D. Some of that it helps to memorize, but it just, again, you think of that underlying concept that we're giving each of those scale degrees a number, and that's going to allow us to transpose it. Okay, so enough talking. Let's get back into this melody. So let's play the opening melody line. We have... So like I said, we're starting with a chord tone up here on this B note, 2nd fret of the A string, and we're going to play that note, then open A string, passing tone, and then down to this G note, again, another chord tone. And then another passing tone, A, and then 3 chord tones in a row, right? So you can see, again, that concept where we're using chord tones, mainly chord tones connected with passing tones. So we have chord tone, passing tone, chord tone, passing tone, chord tone, chord tone, chord tone. And the timing is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Beat 3 of measure 2 is a half note. 3, 4. Okay, let's play that again together. We have... You could even just loop that. And then we're going to basically play a little response phrase over a D chord. So that's the other thing you want to remember, is when the chords change, the chord tones change as well, right? We're still using that same G scale, but we're going to now be playing over a D chord. So this A note in G will was a passing tone, but when we're playing over a D chord, it now becomes a chord tone, so it becomes a strong melody note. So we're playing that A, now a chord tone over D, 3 times. Okay, so we have, let's play measures 1 through 3 so you can hear how it sounds. We have chord changes, chords change back, and we go to 2 chord tones, 2nd fret, and then 5th fret, twice. Same timing, 1, 2, 3, 4. A little left-hand technique tip you want to practice here if you're a beginner, practice keeping your first finger down, and then adding that one higher without lifting this one up. See, I'm not doing this. Like that, right? You want to practice keeping this finger down. It's not going to have any effect when you add the higher note, but you want to keep it down. It's going to keep you in position. You also might go back to that note like that eventually. So if you're doing this, you're creating a lot more work for yourself. So do it this way if you can. Okay, so that's the first 4 measures we have. Not too hard, right? And then we're going to play basically very similar for the next 4 measures. We go, and now we just play it 4 times here, the B note. And then measure 7 is a good example, again, of chord tones and passing tones. So now we're over a D chord again. So the A note, open A string, becomes our chord tone. Now this B note becomes a passing tone, and then we're back to a chord tone. And then we're back to a chord tone, back to our G. So you can see how the chord tones and passing tones kind of shift when the chords change, because that's giving you the indication of what notes you want to highlight, right? So over a D chord, I can play both the A note and the B note, but I want to highlight the A note more. If I highlight the B note more on the D chord, it's going to sound just a little more out there. It's not going to sound as connected to the chord. Whereas on the G chord, it's the opposite, right? The B note is the one that connects me home. The A note is the passing tone. So again, I don't expect you to understand and digest all this right away, but just kind of keep these concepts in the back of your mind. They'll make more sense over time. But you can see how those chord tones and passing tones shift as the chords change. Okay, let's play that whole basic melody. Here we go.